Just a few notes before we actually start on the session. Our sponsors Viator are very kindly organising a competition for visitors here. If you go to viator.com, search for one of their travel experiences. I was talking about it earlier. It's a site where you can go shopping for tours, adventures, experiences in hundreds of destinations around the world, such as Roman gladiator school, Paris shopping trips. If you go on there, have a look at those, tweet which idea that you like, and then 5 people will be picked out later on to win £50 vouchers, so thank you to them. Any travel bloggers who haven't had a chance to do it yet, please take our travel blog survey. We'll include your results in that and share that out in an anonymous and aggregated sense, and one will win an Amazon Kindle. So, perfect tweet. Starting with that. I'll talk about the perfect tweet. These guys can talk about the travel side of things. I had a look at what Twitter said were the most retweeted tweets last year. I think I'm going to stumble over that, aren't I, by the end of it? Top retweeted tweet last year was by the American comedian Stephen Colbert, and it was about the BP disaster. In honour of oil-soaked birds, tweets are now gurgles. Number 2, we always ignore the ones who adore us and adore the ones who ignore us. All American so far. And this is the 3rd and 4th one. A couple of musicians here. These were, these guys have such enormous reach that as soon as they do anything, it's retweeted instantly, even if it's something as ridiculous as "I'm back." But rather than looking at this, from looking at that, you'd think, okay, I have to be American and maybe a rap star to be able to write a tweet that's actually worth retweeting. But there's a really interesting guy out there. I don't know if you've ever come across him. He's called Dan Zarella. You should definitely look at his website, danzarella.com. He calls himself a social media scientist, and he looks at in depth at the analysis of tweets to see what is most effective. He's looked at millions and millions of them, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and so what follows now is some of that information that I'm going to share with you. I don't know if you've seen it before, apologies, but it's worth repeating. So, the value of links in tweets. What these pie charts show on the left-hand side is all tweets, and that's how many are retweeted altogether, and then all tweets with links, and then on the right side retweets with links. So you can see that if you want the influence, if you want people to share your message, it's good having a link in it. And what he's also done is examined where you might want to put that link as well, and probably the common thought on that is that the link should go right at the end, because most of the tweets you see have it right at the end. But what Dan Zarella's done, he's actually gone into the Bitly API, which the pipe to query how these links are being clicked, and he's seen where they're best placed in the tweet, and it's actually not what you think. It's about 25% of the way through the tweet, so very close to the beginning. And Dan's also looked at what's the best time of the week and what the best time of day is to send a tweet. Again, he's split it up into all tweets and retweets, and it's pretty clear there that Fridays are the day to do it. But maybe that's because the weekend's coming. People are thinking that maybe they can slack off their work a bit. And then time of day. These are in Eastern Standard Time. So, he's looked at tweets from all around the world. So the Eastern Standard Time thing is not perhaps too relevant. But you can see from that for the retweets, which are in blue, that the best time of day to do it is 5 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time. So 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Friday. It's apparently the best time to do a tweet. Now, the language you use in your tweets is obviously very important too, to get people to send them around to their friends and share them. And what Dan's done is, again, analyse those millions of tweets and come up with this top 10 list of words that that appear in those retweets. Now, some of those are probably very obvious, but you know, please, for example, retweet, another good example. So I'll leave that on there for a little while, just so you can copy those down. But if you go to his website, he has a very interesting white paper called The Science of Retweets that you can have a look at as well. It's worth downloading for free. So anyway, I use this to create what I think is the perfect tweet. I tried to put the link 25% of the way through, but couldn't quite fit it in the middle there. So I know that looks like nonsense, but you know, he's done the research. It's pretty rigorous. So you know, next time you want to promote something, that's your answer. I know that's been a bit flippant, but I really do have some experts here who are going to talk to me about how they do it in their companies. So I don't know if I could turn it over now to Ian, perhaps, and perhaps you can talk about how you do it, what you find actually works for you in a real environment in the travel industry.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Mark. I remember I have to lean nearer this. Dan Zarella is a great resource for information about tweets in general, but in particular all his analysis on retweets, and I've certainly tried to use that. I have recently, you mentioned that, he only came out with that recently about putting your link about 25% of the way through, and I have experimented with that, but I think it's too early and maybe too low a volume to get any results. I'll be interested to know if you've tried that at all. You haven't tried that, okay. However, currently I'm tweeting on behalf of, I think I have 5 or 6 different identities on Twitter for myself and for clients. And from a travel point of view, obviously a tweet like that isn't really going to get you very far. I think one of the most important things that you need to bear in mind is who your audience is, and the audience will always change depending who your client or what your business is. You know, if you're a tour operator, for example, or if you're a destination, then there's a very different approach that you might take towards your tweeting, and I think the content is the most important element of it. To just look at the content, let's say, the copy side of things. You certainly need to try and find the balance between letting people know that you're nice people, the kind of touchy-feely kind of side of things where you're sharing information and letting them know a little bit more about you and informing them, and the selling side of things. If you're selling the whole time, people are going to turn off and they're not very interested, but there's a time to make sure that you get that sales message in there with a call to action in there, and you can do that very easily in 140 characters, but more importantly, from what we're talking about, the perfect travel tweet. One thing that Dan Zarella doesn't look at, I don't think, is the length of a tweet. But personally, I would never go above 120 characters. Using 140, if you want to get a retweet, is a waste of time, because you're forcing someone to actually edit your tweet down before they're able to retweet it, and that's assuming that they're actually using some piece of software where they be able to do that anyway. It's slightly more complicated, I think, if you're just using Twitter or maybe your phone itself. So personally, a good rule of thumb is don't go over 120 characters. You can actually work it out exactly how many extra characters will be added in by adding in RT space, then your username plus an at and a colon and another space, and that could be your notional maximum, but always keep it to that. So, you know, in general, as there are many journalists who've been here today, I'm sure you're always used to editing down your work. This is the ultimate piece of editing. You know, write in 140 characters, then edit it down to 120 if you can. Less is definitely more in the world of trying to get the perfect travel tweet and trying to increase your retweets.
And do you mix you know, something personal with your work tweets? Yeah,
for sure. I think in the instance where I'm representing, you know, different clients, I would always try and be personal about it, and use the first person singular or the first person plural quite commonly. So it's we think this, or we've seen this, or I've seen this, because people want to be able to relate to you as a person. In general, we all know that within sales, people buy from people they like, and the same principle applies. You might think you're just some corporate identity with your hotel or a tour operator, etc. But that same principle applies. So people want to know a little bit more about yourself. So saying, I saw this and I liked it and I wanted to share it with you, has value, definitely.
And Matt, maybe we can move to you and talk about your experience with On The Go.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that, definitely. And I think in terms of the content of the tweet, it's helpful to think of it as almost like headline writing, short and snappy and to the point, and having a link in there that's leading to something that's really going to interest the people that you're trying to attract. And I think that's probably the most important thing that you can do before you start your social media campaign with Twitter, is try to find out who it is you're trying to attract and what exactly you want them to be reading. Just kind of going out there and blabbing about stuff isn't really going to cut it. You're going to have to fine-tune things quite a bit, in my experience anyway. But in terms of the types of tweets that get retweeted, I always just try to... I think Twitter's kind of changed the way that a lot of traditional media operates. A lot of newspapers and TV stations are looking at Twitter now to find out about breaking news. And I think Twitter's really important in that regard. If you're going to be tweeting, you should really be keeping an eye on what's going on around you, and have that focus on current events and trends, and how does that apply to the people that you're talking to. And I'm also familiar with Dan Zarella's work, and I don't know if I if I agree with his. I mean, it's quite funny that he refers to it as a science, because it's not an exact science. There is no right or wrong answer. I think humor is a really important aspect as well. Funny tweets, or tweets that help to break a viral topic or video that relates somehow to whatever it is that you're doing, are really invaluable.
And what do you use to monitor tweets for the company?
We use Hootsuite, because we've got a variety of different profiles as well. I've got my own personal one, On The Go Matt, which is obviously a company profile, and then we've got On The Go Tours itself, and then if we're running we've run global competitions in the past that have their own profile, so we find it necessary to keep track of 3 or 4 different accounts at the same time. So Hootsuite we found is really good for that, because it also has a custom URL shortener, which will cut down on the amount of characters that you have in your tweet, and it also tells you how many times your link has been clicked and where the click has come from and how many times it's been retweeted and all that sort of stuff. So Hootsuite we find is pretty good for that.
I know that you can integrate that with your Google Analytics as well on your sites in the sort of premium version of that. Do you use that to track whether the people are actually booking holidays?
We do a lot of that sort of stuff, but it's not always immediately clear whether someone simply clicking on a link is going to actually end with them booking a holiday. There's all sorts of research and talk about return on investment with social media and how it works and how you can track that stuff, but it's impossible to tie up every single lead. I think the important thing, for us, more than anything, in the social media aspect of our marketing, is user-generated content. Someone yesterday tweeted me and said, "Hey, I went on holiday with you guys earlier this year and took a whole load of photos of Africa. Here's a link." This guy's a professional photographer who's taken the most stunning photos of Africa, and I'm just, oh my goodness, that's fantastic. It's user-generated content. The guy knows us and he trusts us. He's read our blog. We're not a billboard that's trying to sell to him all the time. We're just a credible resource for travel information, and he came in with that and said, "Hey, check this out." And to me, retweeting that and showing that to everybody else who's following us is going to lead to more sales than just one person who happened to click on something and then possibly book a holiday.
Maybe we could turn to Pleasance now. Do you want me to put your slides up? Yeah. This shows that Pleasance is actually very clever.
Really doesn't. Oh, lucky. Okay, just to give you a bit of context, I'm the online social media content manager at Visit Britain. We've had quite a lot of success with using Twitter, in that we've managed to rise to the #1 tourist board in the world on Twitter. We have a clout score of 74. Those of you who do or don't know, that's the standard measure of influence. Anything above 70 is puts you in the top 1% of Twitter users. We've also, which isn't on here, risen to the second highest travel company in the world, not just tourist board, according to Clout Score. We were named by the Times Online as the tourist board to follow. So I've said all that, and the one thing I wanted to come back to was when Mark said about you being an expert. And yes, we have had a lot of success using Twitter. We have got 45,000 followers about now. We have a tweet reach of around up to 1 million a day. But I genuinely don't think there's any such thing as an expert in Twitter, because generally it comes from the people who are behind it, and it comes from the people who make up Twitter and the whole travel community online. So as much as I'd love to say that was me, you know, I have to actually put it out to here to actually a lot of the guys in this room who can't see, who I work with every day, who are retweeting Visit Britain, who have showed me how to create the world's #1 tourist board on Twitter. Obviously, you guys don't want to hear, you know, it's all about you and it's all about personality. You do want real, you know, tips, real ideas to help you move forward. So I've tried to formulate a sort of a formula almost about what that means. And I was really pleased to hear that Andrew and Ian both talked about content. And weren't so focused on this idea of the perfect tweet, which I know this workshop's called the perfect tweet. And yes, there is a mathematical formula, and I've actually written down a list of about 20 tips and tricks that will literally make your Twitter feed go like that. But if you don't have the content and the personality before that, they're all meaningless. So I guess there's some golden rules that I want to talk about. There's two basically. The first one is, before you start thinking about where I should put a link in my tweet, before, you know, I should calculate how many hashtags I should put in, you need to first of all think about your followers. And I think we all know that. Who's my follower? What do they want? And am I adding value? Am I adding something to their day? Now that value could be anything. That value could be, obviously, you know, the normal things. It could be, for us in traveller information, a destination guide. It could be some insightful statistics. But it could also be, that value could be that you make them smile. You know, it could be that you make them dance that day. I'll give you an example on that. Those of you who were in the UK last April, we had a sudden heat wave, and totally, you know, I'd like to say there was a big strategic coup behind it, but actually it was just, it's hot. And I created on that Visit Britain, like a kind of using punctuation and emoticons, a wave that was a sun dance, set it off, and it was born out of excitement that, you know, it's that it's hot today. This went up and down the country. We had Wimbledon retweeting it, doing a sun dance. We had BA doing a sun dance. We had consumers up and down the country and around the world taking pictures of themselves doing a sun dance and tweeting it back to us. So it's literally, adding value can be anything, but make sure you're giving your followers something, not just giving them you, because I think Twitter can very easily turn into it can very easily turn into an ego trip, because it's you doing, and very often if it's your personal Twitter feed. So that's number one, and the most important is to add value. Every tweet that you send, you have to think, does someone want to read this? Will someone click on this? Will they be interested in this? Will they tell their friends? If they won't, don't bother. And then the second one is really, and that's something that I've done a lot, is to mimic the best. You know, go out and look at the people who are doing it well. When I started, I've been looking after Visit Britain's Twitter feed for about, I think, 3.5 years now, And at a certain point, I started to notice certain individuals within travel, and I was like, these guys are doing it really well. What are they doing? You know, how can I do what they're doing? And, you know, a lot of them now I'm actually working with, because I went to them and said, look, you guys are doing a great job. If you want to know who they are, go to the Visit Britain Super blog and look for Meet the Super Bloggers. And I continue to try to do the things that they're doing, which are things that I can't necessarily replicate as a brand. Number one, I don't have the time. I can't be on Twitter all day. I don't have the experiences. I'm not travelling the world. And possibly I don't have the personalities of 20, 30, a million people. You know, and in today's world of 24/7 connectivity, none of us can ever replicate that and satisfy the Twitter community on our own. So the second point is reach out to the community. Now, I've obviously said that. I've got a whole list of tricks and tips that I can give over, and I don't know if I've taken up too much time or if I should.
Yeah, they do.
We want
We're
to
sitting around. Yeah. And by the way, later on we're going to try, if the technology allows us, to have the panel actually critique your tweets on this screen. So if any of you think you know the perfect travel tweet, can you just tweet it with the hashtag STM 2011? It will appear on there, and these guys will pick it apart.
So the point that I would like to say though about the tips and tricks is that it comes down to content, as we've all said, and anyone who's succeeded, it comes down to content, not about making a formula. But of course, as with anything, there are things that work better and things that don't. For Visit Britain, it may be different for you guys, I don't know. Within travel, things that have worked and do work really well for us, if you want a list, are lists, first of all. Top 10s, top 5s, top 7s, top 3.5s, anything with a number in it. You'll get a retweet, you'll get it followed, you'll get it sent out. Photos is a brilliant one. There's not enough photo sharing on Twitter. If any of you, I challenge any of you to take a picture now, share it on Twitter, and see how many views you get. Through Twitter. Literally, I have my personal Twitter feed, and I might write. I usually do work stuff, but occasionally I might write something about, I'm out in a bar. 100 views. Who cares where I am? 100 views. There won't be 100 views of certain other pieces of content that I put out. Work links or websites, pictures, go for them. I'll give you one example. With the Visit Britain Superblog, we have a lot of picture posts. Some of them get up to 10,000 views, and the principal mode of promotion for that is Twitter. So underutilised, has got massive prospects. Which something that these guys have already talked about. Talk about something current, something that people are already talking about. So immediately interject. If there's a conversation happening, interject into it. You become current. People are thinking it and they want to talk about it. You give them a vehicle to talk about that, particularly if you're in an influential space. And this is another one which I think a lot of people don't use very much, is use visual cues. It's much the same as usability on a website. The Twitter stream, whether they're viewing it through Twitter or through Hootsuite, they need something that will pull the eye into what they're looking at. And it's like this sun wave that I talked about. The success was probably born out of the fact that it was a visual cue. It was this creation of a wave using emoticons and suns. When often, if I really want someone to click on a link, I'll put an arrow in there, click on the link, and it makes somebody go, oh, click on the link. It's very simple, but it really works. Use of hashtags, absolutely use hashtags. Get involved in hashtag conversations. Don't use too many. One thing that will always happen, if you start to overload, and I see it a lot, overload with hashtags, you don't know what you're supposed to be looking at, you don't know which link to click on, and you get confused. I would personally, I don't know if you guys have any opinion, I would recommend not more than 2 hashtags personally. But
I'd agree, yeah, definitely. It needs to be clear and concise, and no more than 2, I'd say.
What about frequency of tweeting? Maybe Ian or Matt can talk about that. And also on top of that, do you repeat tweets as well if you're putting a link in?
Yeah. Taking the second point first, yeah, often repeat tweets, because the volume of tweets that people have to kind of get through can be so high. Often send the same tweet out, or maybe slightly adjusted, so one might go out in the evening and one goes out early the following morning. And there's a number of applications such as Hootsuite that was mentioned before, or TweetDeck, where you can schedule tweets as well, which I use a lot, so that tweets go out early in the morning, so that when someone logs on, they're much more likely to see them. I know the stats say that people are more likely to retweet later on. But in answer to the question, yeah, there's definitely a window for sending out the same tweet more than once. And the first question again was
frequency of
frequency. Yeah, I think again that depends a lot on your audience as well. I mean, there's one client who I'm working for who automates their tweeting, which I don't really like, but it works for him. And as it goes, they happen to get quite a high level of retweets out of it. So they're sending out, 20 or 30 tweets a day. To me, it just seems, too much. I think it turns people off, but they happen to be using hashtags very well, and they pick up an audience through that. I think you really have to find what works for your audience, and you'll be able to, if you observe the stats, follow that and find the right level. I don't think there's an answer where you can say it's 2 a day or 10 a day or anything like that.
What would you say on that, Pleasance?
Personally, I'd say, obviously, we visit Britain public sector, so we don't always have the resource that we would hope for. I would encourage frequent tweeting, and I've noticed from my experience, the more frequent the tweeting, the higher the acquisition of new followers, the higher the retweets. Ideally, no, auto retweets I wouldn't do, but sometimes, you're not going to be awake 24 hours a day, so it might be something that you do feel you need to set up. Regarding tweeting the same thing, I think absolutely, if you've got a good message to send, if you've got a piece of news, some information, of course, why not? We don't tell BBC News that you can only give one piece of news, at one point in the day, and you can't do it at 5 o'clock and at 7 o'clock and at 8 o'clock, or indeed for the next 10 days. So it works the same way. Not everybody's watching the news at 10 or the news at 6, so not everybody's online at that moment when you're tweeting. If it's a really compelling message and really interesting, then absolutely give it to them. I've heard, kind of stories that the average tweet lasts 75 seconds, I think. But I don't think that's true. So before you write it down, I think it's much closer to an hour or an hour and a half because of the rate that I have replies to tweets. But the point is, it's chronological. There's no algorithm that rates, superiority of one tweet or another. So you're working on a chronological scale. If you tweet it now, and you tweet it in 2 hours, it's unlikely that anyone will have already seen that tweet. So why not, if it's compelling, if it really is pushing your message forward, or if it's getting you sales in something, why not send it again?
Can I just add to that? I'd say there's no algorithm yet.
Yeah, true.
I'm sure there will be very shortly.
Yeah.
What's the panel's view on having more than one person in the organisation tweeting?
Well, personally, it's for On The Go Tours anyway. I am the social media department, so that's it. But I would say, theoretically, of course, it's no matter how many people you have looking after your Twitter feed, I think it's really important to know exactly what kind of tone of voice you're going to go for, and have a kind of a code of how you're going to do things. So a maximum number of repeated tweets, a maximum number perhaps of tweets per day, whatever it is that you decide to do, whatever you find that works best for you. I think however many people you've got doing it, preferably as low as possible, though, I would say. As long, what would you guys say?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room to have a large number of people within the organisation. If you've got reliable staff who can be trained to contribute and the right kind of balance, then it can work. With a tour operator, for example, who's got a number of staff who are based overseas in different locations around the world, they can definitely contribute valuable, interesting content that's going to be exciting for followers. If you happen to have someone out in the jungle in South America or something, commenting on how they saw a snake during their morning walk, off the top of my head, or something like that, then you can really get a feel for the company and for the product, and that's something that your followers would find kind of interesting. And I think maybe if you allied that to what you're talking about a photo being contributed. Certainly, I work in the ski industry primarily, and there are a couple of tour operators out there who are actually utilising their staff to get them to run their own Twitter accounts from individual resorts, and then getting them to put their snow reports out via Twitter. And I think that that can work really well as a way of getting everyone in the team to come on board.
I'd agree with that, but I think on that point, it's important to add that Twitter is often used by people who have possibly had, if you guys have been following what's been going on with Qantas lately, Twitter is the main mouthpiece for people to voice the fact that they're really dissatisfied with the service that Qantas has been giving them. And in that instance, you need as few people as possible answering whatever query it is or whatever complaint it is that people have, because otherwise there's always the possibility of having conflicting messages or conflicting reports, and that's the last thing you want if you're trying to do damage control. But yeah, in the case of something like that, I think it could be really valuable. So it just depends on the profile you have.
Okay, so I don't know if we're getting many tweets in. I saw David's on there about free iPads or something, but